We're on till 1, so you can call 66 13 68, text 166 177, email studio@manxradio.com, or WhatsApp 166 177. The Treasury Minister, Alex Allinson, MHK, is with us today. Treasury is the Finance Department of the Isle of Man Government, preparing the annual budget for the government, handling taxation, customs and excise, economic affairs, information systems, internal audit, currency, and the census, amongst other things. But yesterday there was a budget in the UK. So, Faster My, Alex Allinson. Hi, Dr. Allinson.
Good morning.
Good to have you along. Did the UK government, does the budget there, does it make any immediate impact to us? Have you filtered through the whole thing yet?
It does. I mean, obviously we're very close to the UK, and some of our fiscal policies are very closely aligned. So one of the things I had to do yesterday was do a special order to increase the duty on tobacco products. So cigarettes, cigars and hand-rolling tobacco all went up yesterday at 6 o'clock in line with the UK, because we tend to share duties on those sort of things. Others don't necessarily affect us. I mean, what we had yesterday, unfortunately, we don't get any tip-offs, and it was really interesting yesterday that the Madam Deputy Speaker told off the Treasury for leaking so much in the weeks beforehand, and said actually the budget is for the House of Commons; it shouldn't be leaked out, which was an interesting start to the proceedings. I was sitting there with all the Treasury officers, people from Customs and Excise, people from Income Tax, listening to it and taking notes. And obviously we've been then looking at the implications for our island. But it was a historic budget. It was the first one for over 14 years from a Labour government, and the first one from a female Chancellor of the Exchequer.
It was a long budget, long speech, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, 2 years ago when Kwasi Kwarteng was in that position and stood up, I remember leaving it and thinking, well, that's not going to affect us, but I don't know how they're going to afford it. Of course, then what we saw was a bit of a meltdown on the bond market, and then interest rates going up, and that directly affected people on the Isle of Man. So we're still looking at the implications. It is comforting that this morning the IMF came out in broadly supportive. The bond markets haven't reacted. Most people knew what was coming. It didn't come as a major shock. They may not like it, but it didn't come as a major shock. So I hope we will have a period of fiscal stability in the UK. And from a Treasury Minister's point of view, stability and certainty are really, really important.
We've talked many, many times about the NI fund. Could you just give us a pen portrait, a pencil line around the whole thing about where we are with the NI fund?
Yeah, and obviously people are going to be wondering about that, because one of the big, and when you look at the UK budget, they were really big in terms of taxes. So they talked about inheritance tax and capital gains tax. Now, we don't have those here. There are some of my colleagues, and even this week, were saying we should have them here. I disagree, and in the tax strategy we brought through in March, we said we weren't going to introduce those. They only affect a small number of people, but the changes they made, particularly in terms of freezing in the tax threshold of £325,000 until 2030, will draw more and more people into inheritance tax. What they did say was that they're going to put up national insurance for employers. So those businesses that employ people, that's going to go up from 13.8% to 15%. We don't have to follow suit. We have a different NI system. What the UK do is they don't have an NI fund. They just pay it out of revenue. So what they get in through NI goes out in terms of benefits and pensions, which are about 80% of the benefits. Now, on the Isle of Man, we have very similar benefit system, very similar pension system, but we have an NI fund, which is over £1 billion now. It's been built up over generations, which is ring-fenced to pay for those benefits, but also each year a proportion of that, the NHS allocation, goes to the health service. But it is protected, and money can't be taken down from it except with the will of Tynwald. So if I want to go forward, that has to be as part of the budget to take any money out of the NI fund. What we've got in November is a discussion about the long-term sustainability of the National Insurance Fund, because we've had, for over the last decade, various reports that say that if we do nothing, it's going to run out by 2047, and then we'll have to pay as you go. We won't have a funds there. I'd like to have that discussion with Tynwald members about the best way of securing its long-term future. One of the options from a UK perspective is to charge people more, charge businesses more for employing people. Is that what we want here for our island? Or do we actually want to look at other ways of controlling what comes in, what goes out, and particularly look at the triple lock?
Right. Okay. So obviously this is a generational problem because people are just living a lot longer. Routinely, people are living into their 90s. They can be pulling a pension for 30 years.
Yeah, it's great. It shows not just the advances in medical technologies and medical science, but the advances in people's health, their diets. I mean, yes, we go on about obesity and things like that. People are living a lot healthier now. Part of that is smoking, less people dying on the roads, less people, dying due to alcohol. But also it's the general health, general diet, and people are living longer, and that's great. What we've done in terms of Treasury is look at, extending the retirement age. Well, I've committed that we're not going to do that. Right. It's already programmed to go up over the next couple of decades to 68. That's long enough because people wear out. Despite them being healthy, they do wear out. So, making people work for longer and longer isn't really an option, but we do need to make sure that what we do now doesn't jeopardise the pensions of our children going forward into the next couple of decades.
So with the crunch coming, albeit crunch a long way away, yeah. What is the strategy? As you say, if you're not charging people more and you're not paying people out less and the pension age isn't going to go higher than 68, where does the answer lie?
The answer lies with looking at what's going into the fund and what's going out. Now, on the Isle of Man, it roughly balances. So what people pay in for national insurance comes out in terms of benefits. Now, any surplus is put into the fund. The fund is there to balance those years where it doesn't quite balance and we need a little bit more to go into benefits. And we use that this year because we put pensions up quite significantly. And obviously there's a lag in terms of the money that's coming in. The solutions to that is to look into who's paying into the fund. So trying to make sure that the people are in work. And that's what the economic strategy is about, increasing the working population, looking at those people who aren't in work. So one of the things I talked about in Tynwald's this month was we have some policies going ahead that we'll be announcing in terms of some of the people who are on long-term sickness benefit to see what we can do to help them get back to work rather than being stuck on benefits and not having the ability to rejoin the workforce. So there's that side of it. But also in terms of the benefits that are paid out, making sure that they're appropriate for those people, looking at, as I said, 80% of our benefit spend is on pensions. Let's get the pensions right. Let's make sure that they go up with inflation, absolutely, but that they're affordable in the long term. And one of the things that we've done for November, Tynwald, when we're going to have a debate about this, is there's a report that's published on the Tynwald website now that looks into the various options, moving away from the triple lock that was a political policy brought in by the Cameron government back in the day, and saying, right, if we increase year-on-year pensions by inflation or some other measure to keep up with the rising prices, actually that would maintain the fund going into the future. But if we do nothing at the moment, if we don't have these conversations, if we don't make decisions now, we're just baking in that redundancy of the fund. And I don't think that's useful for anyone.
Okay. When you mentioned that people are on long-term sick and possibly getting them back to work, there's a contentious side to that, and that is, sorry to use the word, but shirkers. Sometimes people hide under long-term sick. Do you think there's any prevalence of that on the Isle of Man?
That's a really difficult one because nobody wants to go off sick. Nobody wants to leave the workforce. What concerns me is that we've seen over the last decade quite a significant change. It used to be that people had bad backs, broken limbs, sickness, disabilities. We've got long COVID and ME and a whole range of things would make them off sick. What we're seeing now, both here and across, is a lot of younger people who have got mental health problems, who, because of anxiety, depression, are unable to be in a workforce. And that really upsets me, right, personally, both as a doctor and the Treasury Minister, because I see that as really limiting their life, their life choices. Our benefits aren't bad, but they're nothing to brag about. I don't think anyone would voluntarily go on to benefits long term. So what we're looking at is how we can give them the support they need through counselling, mentorship, help to get back into the workforce. because I think everyone agrees that we need to put more resources into mental health to secure people's mental health, but we don't want a wasted generation of people who are unable to work, unable to improve their own prospects and the prospects of their families.
Interesting. Okay, lots more to get to, but let's get to the lines first of all. Julian's on there. Hi, Julian. You're live with the Treasury Minister.
Hi, Andy, and hello, Alex.
Hello, Julian. Back on first again.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, it's just it's one of those things. Get the right time. As Treasury Minister, Alex, you're responsible and accountable for government spending. I'm concerned. I've just got a short list here. Ever-increasing spending at Manx Care for a worse outcome. The recommended funding formula from Sir Jonathan Michael's report has been ignored. You were advised, Alex, by the Public Accounts Committee to produce Manx Care's unaudited accounts, known as the Light Blue Book, for targeted scrutiny, but you've refused to do this, and you cited that it would take up too much of officers' resources, despite Manx Care hiring 14 new staff last year for, and I quote, enhanced corporate governance.
Okay, one at a time, Treasury Minister.
Yeah, thanks very much, Julian. So the Light Blue Book, as you say, is the unaudited government accounts. It's not to do with Manx Care. It encompasses the Department of Health and Social Care, but it's not about Manx Care. It's the overall accounts. What we did is published unaudited government accounts within the 6-month time period, and we will be publishing also the audited government accounts for the last financial year as recommended by the PAC. So we are doing that. In terms of the Sir Jonathan Michael's report, again, I think we need to get over that. I really do. Sir Jonathan Michaels was brought in, suggested creating Manx Care, suggested a whole range of things that could be used. If you read his report, he also talked about alternative ways of funding healthcare and even privatisation, which this administration has absolutely ruled out. But what he also did, as you say, and subsequent to the report, was to look at the funding of healthcare and saying, actually, the funding of healthcare is always above the rate of inflation because of the prices of drugs, wage inflation, also new technologies. So what was recommended was a 3% increase above the given rate of inflation for each year. And year on year, actually, we have managed to keep up with that. In 2023-24, when inflation hit 9.8%, we didn't give the whole 9.8%, because that would have been a significant increase. But I actually talked to Sir Jonathan Michael about that, and he absolutely agreed that even in his report, he didn't expect inflation to get that high. So we have been trying to make absolutely certain that healthcare is funded on this island, which is why it got an extra £43.8 million this year.
Okay, Julian?
Well, yet, Manx Care has gone up, 17 million overspend. We've moved Laurie Hooper out, and yet there has not been a word to ask exactly why management like Teresa Coe is allowing all this to happen. You've had loads of new people being hired there. How much is the overhead? I mean, I would imagine as Treasury Minister, do you have an idea of what the proportion of back office and administration and what was it, enhanced corporate governance, 14 people? I mean, how much is that lot as an overhead on the health spend?
Yeah, I mean, so to answer those various questions, one of the problems with health services is that we can't carry on throwing money at them. We can't give them a blank check. That isn't just me. That's what Lord Darcy reported in the UK when they recently looked at exactly the same situation they're in. You need effective management that will challenge some of the assumptions, challenge some of the spending. Now, in terms of Manx Care's forecasted overspend of 17 million, that was made quite clear in their July accounts. Treasury have been there to support the Department of Health and Social Care to actually examine that overspend, interrogate that overspend, see what can be done within the year to bring that back into a balanced budget. But it is difficult, and that's why there's been various arguments that have led really to the resignation of Laurie Hooper, which I very much regret. But he took a policy that actually what was happening wasn't overspending, and I disagree with him. I think there are savings that can be made. There are reforms that can be made to our health service to deliver those frontline services. And again, I've made quite clear that I don't think our NHS is broken. I think when you look at some of the biggest increases in spending in Manx Care, it has been about patient safety and actually the services provided to people. And now patient safety people don't notice, but it's really, really important after the CQC reports that came out. So yes, we are interrogating the Manx Care spend. We are supporting the Department of Health and Social Care in terms of doing that. And we are really concentrating, one, to see what we can do for this financial year, but also those fundamental changes that need to be made in terms of the governance of spending in Manx Care and our health and social care service to bring it in on budget for next year and the years after.
Okay, we've got to crack on, Julian. Lots of people queuing up. Thanks for being with us.
All right, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, and David's with us now. Hi, David. You're live with Dr. Allinson.
Oh, good afternoon, Minister. I've got a question for you on VAT on King Bill's fees.
Yep.
Can you tell us how much you think that will bring into the Treasury and what your intentions are to do with that revenue, whether you're going to ring-fence it like Rachel Reeves is for the state sector? That's the first point. And secondly, I understand that from the Manx Radio report in August that yourself and the Enterprise Minister, or certainly the senior officers in your department, were in discussions with King Bills to look at what support you could help give them because of this extra burden on them. Can you give us some idea of what form government support will take?
Yeah, thanks very much, David, because, again, that was one of the things that Rachel Reeves was talking about yesterday. It was one of their manifesto policies, and it is politically and ideologically driven, that they thought it was unfair that private schools managed to avoid VAT on the services that they produce, but also there were various things about rates and charities and the way that works. Now, that's a big issue for the UK. They've got lots of private schools, but they still only contribute to a very small proportion of the pupil population go to private schools. And we know that they're disproportionately represented in universities and also disproportionately represented in Parliament as well. We've got one private school on the Isle of Man, which is King William's College. It is important in terms of a choice for people on the Isle of Man. It's also important for people who want to move over here, who want to make that choice. So I certainly have no ideological problem with King Bills. But we've got a new Labour government that's come in that's changed their VAT allocation, and we're linked to them in terms of VAT. We can deviate, and we have deviated in the past in terms of the 5% VAT rate for house improvements, and then that's taken out of the overall allocation. We're currently going through a recalculation of the VAT sharing agreement, which is done every 5 years, and I'll be dealing with that over the next couple of weeks, so we're really close to doing that. And any deviation from the VAT sharing agreement with the UK has to be negotiated. Now, personally, I don't think now is the right time, as we're going through that recalculation, to start renegotiating with the Labour government, where this is one of their key policies. So what we have done is sat, myself and the DFE Minister, Tim Johnson, we've had regular dialogue with King William's College and the trustees there, because they see this, on the face of it, as an existential threat to them. If their fees had to go up 20%, then that might actually put a lot of people off sending their children there, and then could jeopardise their long-term future. And this is a historic institution for the Isle of Man. What we've done is worked through with them, and the support we gave them was not financial support. It was going through them with some of our tax experts from Treasury to show them that although they would be paying VAT, because they'd then be a VAT registered business, they could offset some of the VAT spend in other areas. And what we've seen across the UK is various private schools being able to absorb that 20% VAT within their existing budgets by reallocating some of that. So we've worked with King Bills to explain a situation that they've never been in, and guide them through the process of being VAT registered. And I know a lot of private businesses, when they become more successful, have to go back VAT registered, so that they'll understand some of the challenges there and the pros and cons of it. But actually working with them, because in terms of the overall offering of the Isle of Man, that choice of private education, the same way as a choice of private medical care, is important for some people.
Okay, David?
Yeah, I just want to come back. How much? Yeah, but the question was, Minister, how much money will you be getting from that VAT uplift now, and what will you be doing with that money? Will you be ring-fencing it, or will it be going into the general pot?
So in answer to how much we'll get, as I explained, because they can offset VAT even though they charge it, the actual amount coming in to the Treasury through the VAT sharing agreement may be negligible. And actually what we've tried to do is make sure that we're putting money into education, which is why between health and education they've got an extra £53 million in this February's budget.
Okay. All right, David, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. Just regarding King William's College and the Buchan, of course, because they're going to be sharing the site in some point in the future. I mean, it's fairly obvious in looking at the UK that there's a minor form of class warfare going on, in that many people in the Labour Party distinctly set against private education, apart from the fact that some of them send their children to public schools. Yep. So there's an element of hypocrisy there. And the fact that King William's College, maybe from the outside, appears to be bursting with money, and of course anyone who knows it isn't. King William's College is not overflowing with money. I just wonder how close this is. As you say, there may be an existential threat to King William's College and the Buchan.
Yes, it saddened me, actually, when I was Education Minister back in 2020, and I went to visit them just before COVID, and we were having a chat about things, and they said, you know what, you're one of the first Education Ministers who's come in here in a long time, and they felt left out. And I tried to work with them during COVID, in particular, to support them and help them as much as possible. They tried to do a very good job in terms of the educational choice they give the International Baccalaureate, and that really helps certain students who don't like A-levels, and bringing down your choice of options quite significantly after O-level. But they are working out the historic listed building. Yeah. I mean, I hate to see their gas bill. I mean, it costs a fortune just to maintain that building and run it. When you look at the history of King Bills, I mean, we're coming up to Memorial Day, and people will be standing in the cenotaph. I remember one of the most striking things 2 years ago was a picture that they had of all the people at King Bills from the First World War, and the number who died for King and Country, the number who went over and died. You know, that they are important, and it would be a great shame to lose such an important institution, such an important choice for people, just on the base of an ideology.
Okay, let's go to Les. Hi, Les, you're live with the Treasury Minister.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Alex. Would I be right in saying that not all pensioners are getting a triple lock rise? Those claiming after 2019 aren't getting it.
Thanks very much, Les. So basically what happened back in 2016 is previous administrations looked at the pension system and split from the UK. We now have basically a two-tier pension system. Those who retired before 2019, who are very much locked into the UK system, and those who retired after 2019. Now, the ones who retired before 2019, because of the UK Chancellor's commitment to retain the triple lock, will be getting a 4.1% increase from April next year. What I'm coming to Tynwald with is a proposal that those people on the Manx state pension who retired after 2019, that we take control of that increase and we look at an inflationary increase which would be 2.1%, 2.2%, which was the September Manx CPI, as opposed to the 1.7%, which was the UK CPI. So I am proposing that we split with the triple lock, and for those people who retired on a Manx state pension, which actually is more beneficial to them and more generous than the previous pension, that we look at how we can sustain that long term. And by splitting with the triple lock for those pensioners who retired after 2019, actually all the forecasts show that the NI fund, which is so important in terms of the bedrock of our economy, will be sustainable right past 2047, when otherwise it would run out. So that's the reason to suggest this to Tynwald, and then to have that debate in November Tynwald. Nothing has been set out. This will be part of a budgetary process that we'll be bringing next February to Tynwald. But I think it was absolutely right now to have that discussion and look at how we can sustain the NI fund going forward into the future.
Yeah, they've had to work 7 years extra in paying into the system. So, you know, pensioners should all get it like the UK.
Well, so as I said, we've got a two-tier system at the moment, and the previous administration brought in a pension supplement to work for that transition between one pension system to another. If we stick with the way we're going, we will not have an NI fund in the next couple of decades. It will be gone. And then the people working at that time will have to pay more and more NI contributions for a bigger and bigger welfare spend. What I'm suggesting is that we have that discussion now. If necessary, we make those hard decisions now to protect that fund in the future.
Okay, all right, let's appreciate that. Thanks for calling. 29 minutes now before 1. So just restate this for effect then. Any change is only going to affect those who reach state pension age after the 5th of April 2019. Is that right?
The pension beforehand is very much locked into the UK, and again, anyone who's interested in this, please look on the Tynwald website, because we've got a paper there produced by Treasury looking at the NI fund and some of the intricacies of it. Treasury received money from the UK to pay some of those pensions, those pre-2019 pensions, as a settlement fee, because a lot of those people paid into NI that was then shared with the UK. We split away from that, which is why we can set our own national insurance rates, which is why we don't have to follow with a 15% for businesses on the Isle of Man. But by doing the changes that the report suggests, by looking at how we can increase pensions, absolutely, in line with inflation, or there are some other measures we can do it above inflation, and having a protective floor there to make sure that we don't get to the situation which brought in the triple lock, which is where inflation was zero and therefore people wouldn't get any increase at all. If we can bring those changes in now, we can guarantee the long-term sustainability of that fund.
Okay, if you don't want to go to the Tynwald website, go to manxradio.com. There's a link on it there. Okay, it's 27 minutes before 1. We're live with the Treasury Minister on Mannin Line today.
Housing, benefits or employment issues, faulty goods, bad workmanship, financial problems and relationship breakdowns. We all run into difficulties in life, and it can feel like there's no one who can help you sort them out. But at Manx Citizens Advice Service, we can help. As an independent charity, we offer free, confidential support covering all sorts of areas. You don't need an appointment. Just call in at Promenade Church, Loch Promenade, Douglas, or call 366 338. Open Tuesdays from 12:30 till 3 and Fridays 10 till 12:30. Manx Citizens Advice Service. Your advice service.
At the Isle of Man Creamery, we're proud to be a farmers' cooperative, owned and operated by our local farmer producers. The welfare of our animals is our top priority, and all our milk and dairy products are certified grass-fed, meaning the herd have more time outdoors roaming the pastures. We also only use bio-based milk cartons, so no fossil fuels are used in their production, plus we offer a full carton recycling service too. Isle of Man Creamery, crafted to perfection since 1934.
Remember, Douglas Fireworks on the 5th of November. This year's fireworks display in Douglas will be bigger and better than ever. The fun kicks off at 7 p.m. on the promenade with the Best Guy competition. Please ensure all guys are registered by 6:45 p.m. Then at 7:30, the fireworks display will light up the bay for a spectacular show choreographed to music from the movies. Douglas Fireworks, Tuesday, November 5th. Brought to you by Douglas City Council, sponsored by Selton Manx and supported by Manx Radio.
Today at 5:30, join me, Fiona McCardle, for Shachley.
The Hop Janae song is something which has always been improvised and varied and changed. It's a part of the tradition. We should feel very pleased that they are there.
Coosh. And Coosh has lots of different meanings. It can be a cosy gathering. It can also mean a subject or a matter or a cause.
That's 5:30 today. Shachley with me, Fiona McCardle.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
And good afternoon, Linda. You're live with Dr. Alex Allinson, MHK, the Treasury Minister. Hello, Linda.
Hello. Good afternoon to you, Andy, and good afternoon to you, Minister.
Good afternoon.
Can I ask whether the Isle of Man government will pay for Enhertu, which, as a doctor you'll know, is a drug for those people who are unfortunate enough to have secondary, advanced, stage 4, call it what you want, metastatic breast cancer?
I can't answer that question, to be honest with you. I do apologise. I mean, one of the things in terms of our healthcare system, as you're probably aware, is it doesn't necessarily have to follow NICE guidance. They do try at various points. Now, as I remember, this was a drug that NICE actually decided that wasn't cost effective, and therefore they weren't going to fund in the UK. Is that right?
No, it's not the UK. Scotland has it available to patients, but England and Wales
hasn't. Yeah, and I think with some of these newer drugs, when they come out, you do get what can sometimes be described as a postcode lottery. Now, we tend to, obviously, for advanced cancer patients like that, they would normally see a specialist in England at one of the cancer centres in the northwest. So if they can't prescribe it, they wouldn't normally be prescribed to Manx residents who are visiting those institutions as well.
What's it called again, Linda? What's it called?
Enhertu, ENHERTU.
Yeah, I mean there are some incredibly interesting new sort of immune modulators coming through for terminal cancers and advanced cancers, which can prolong people's lives. But really, I think in answer to your question, I'm not sure whether those would be available to Manx patients who are visiting the UK and seeing an English consultant, because they would very much be controlled by their own prescribing guidelines.
Yeah, what if an English consultant has said that they could prescribe it, but only on a private basis to a patient in the Isle of Man?
Yeah, I mean that does happen sometimes.
For the patient.
Yeah, I mean the patient can. I know people who have gone through private therapies when they haven't been available on the NHS either here or across. I don't know how much this drug costs, but I assume it's going to be quite expensive.
Pounds every 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, so in answer to your question, certainly you can have individual funding requests that can be brought forward to Manx Care, but those are very much assessed on a person-by-person basis.
Does this affect you personally, Linda?
Yes, that's why I know how much it costs.
Yeah.
How much again was it? We didn't catch that.
£7,000 every 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Minister, would that be the most expensive drug that do you know the relative costs of drugs?
No, and I'm sorry to learn about your illness, Linda, genuinely. No, I mean that's one of the aspects of medications now. We some of the more transformational drugs that are being used, the gene therapy drugs, can be over £1 million a year. Now for that individual person, they can be absolutely life-changing. But for an overall healthcare system, sometimes they can be extremely expensive, and it's not just medications as well. Some of the patients who have been sent across and who are in intensive care for long periods of time, the bills there can rack up to hundreds of thousands of pounds, and that's one of the pressures on our NHS that needs to be dealt with and actually recognised.
So, Linda, I'm terribly sorry to hear of that situation.
Thank you. Where can I find the circumstances in which the island would step outside the NICE guidelines?
I mean, basically that would be based on the recommendation of the consultant that the person is under, and if they are recommending a drug that isn't available in the UK or the Isle of Man, there is a process by which special dispensation can be given by the Department of Health and Social Care for funding of that drug. So it goes through normally a committee stage, and then the decision can be made based on the recommendation of the treating consultant whether they actually fund that medication.
Okay, Linda, I appreciate your call.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good to hear from you. I think we've just gained a glimpse of Manx Care's world, haven't we?
It's really difficult, and one of the aspects of any healthcare system, and again, let's get away from Manx Care. Manx Care was brought in to run our healthcare system efficiently, but as you started off in the programme, we've got people living longer, which is great, but then they tend to accumulate illnesses, unfortunately. But we also have a medical science industry now that's coming up with more and more cures and sometimes more and more treatments for incurable things.
We couldn't have foreseen 50, 60, 70 years ago.
Absolutely not.
So there's almost that grim equation, as it were, whereas years and years ago people used to smoke for 50 years, retire at 65 and die within 5 years.
Yep.
Nowadays, nobody's smoking, and people are living to the age of 90 routinely, so we don't have all that tobacco duty, and people are draining the pension pot.
No, as Treasury Minister, I'm not recommending people take up the fags. No. Absolutely not. And this is a fantastic thing, because they're living longer, they're living more productive lives, they're looking after their grandchildren, they're looking after their children, they're keeping our heritage going.
Right.
I mean, I don't see getting old. I don't see getting old as a problem, but we have to accept that the costs of providing a fully inclusive health service go up each year.
So the equation has changed. The public just didn't notice it.
I think we've been, in some ways, hiding it for quite a few years. We've got used to Department for Health coming forward every year with an overspend, and everyone criticises it, but they vote it through. The way Manx Care was set up was to try to deal with that and actually say, right, what budget do we need and what do you actually want us to provide? Because at the moment we have a healthcare system trying to provide everything for everybody, and sometimes we need to make those hard decisions to say we can't as a nation carry on affording to spend an extra £30 million every single year for the healthcare system that we have. We've got to look at what we're providing. We've got to look at the cost of it. We've got to produce efficiencies, and Manx Care have done. But sometimes we will have to say, actually, we have to concentrate on acute medicine. We have to concentrate on the cancer problems that Linda has. We have to concentrate on these and some of the other things that we're doing, whatever they may be. And we can talk about prescription charges and eligibility criteria, or escorts to take people over to the UK for medical treatment, or can they use telemedicine to be seen here rather than going across? All those sort of things have to come into the mix to actually get a sustainable healthcare system. Otherwise, with the way that healthcare spending goes up every single year, we will have to be chasing that with taxes. Now, this year I became very unpopular by putting taxation up by 2% to actually try to meet with what was a £43.8 million extra. I mean, to put that into context, that's what the Department of Home Affairs spend on all of their police, all of their fire officers, all of their civil defence, and more, just in terms of an increase. So we have, if we're going to have the standard of living that we want on the Isle of Man, we have to get that healthcare spending into control.
And can you, as minister and as a politician, can you see the wood for the trees? Can you see a way out of this? Can you see a destination?
Yes, I can. And again, this isn't just our problem. I think when you look at all the developed countries around the world, they are wrestling with these exact problems: the cost of drugs, the diagnosis of people, the cost of providing care. What we know is that if you invest in health promotion, disease prevention and primary care, if people can get to see their GP, if they can get to see with their dentist, it stops them having to go into hospital. And once they're in hospital, that's where the really expensive stuff starts. So if we can keep people healthy in our community more, if we can invest in community services, then actually we can control some of this overruns. And this isn't new. I mean, if you remember, Howard Quayle went to New Zealand to see the Canterbury model, whereby their hospital was destroyed by an earthquake, and so they had to concentrate on community services, but they actually then found that they got much better services through that. Okay.
Live with the Treasury Minister today, Cameron has dropped a note in just to say, are you or a representative? Let's see. How much attention do you pay to the actions of other countries' economic strategies, particularly, says Cameron, El Salvador and their remarkable turnaround? Perhaps it would be good use of an envoy, especially to see firsthand what's happening in El Salvador and how quickly they're doing it. Perhaps a good time to discuss the facts of what Bitcoin is, as well as an economic strategy for Treasury reserves to keep people's time and energy preserved. Other countries, places like Rwanda, Singapore.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Cameron. There's lots of people, as I said, struggling with very similar problems and coming up with different solutions. So I'm aware of some of the South American countries, the way that they've done bond issuances in terms of green bonds, sustainability bonds. I know that some of them have also been looking at cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, and changing a lot of their financing. But we also are very aware, particularly on the Isle of Man, about some of the misuse of cryptocurrencies in terms of money laundering, particularly when it's associated with illegal gambling and criminal activities. And so I think we as a nation have to be very careful. Looking at other countries in terms of their economic strategy is important. One, to see the opportunities, but also to see some of the risks. And so, going back to the budget yesterday, there were some definite statements about things like inheritance tax, capital gains tax, non-dong tax rules, which may actually give some opportunities for the Isle of Man, but may also attract attention from the Treasury Minister over there about what we're doing over here with our own tax legislation.
That's an interesting point, because if they're ideologically set against, we talked about private schools, And I noticed that part of their savings was to tax avoidance. They called it tax avoidance. Now, are we in their crosshairs?
I think when you look at not just the Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey, we have always had mud slung at us that we're tax havens. Tax avoidance, actually, no, we don't do that. We allow structures on the Isle of Man and the other Channel Islands to be created, particularly for people who live outside of the UK, to manage their tax affairs more efficiently, but not to necessarily avoid tax or do anything illegal. What we do need to do, though, is work with the Jersey and Guernsey to make sure that there's that understanding in Westminster. And it was really interesting to meet with the Lord Mayor of the City of London, who came over yesterday and met with the Chief Minister, because they actually do appreciate that we are a very, very important part of the financial services system in the UK as a conduit for often outside money going into the UK and then flowing back out again. So I think it is important that we get that understanding with the Labour Party, and that's why we have been visiting Labour Party conferences and establishing those links with politicians in Westminster so that they know that we are a help to the UK economy and not a threat.
Okay, Dr. Allinson is with us till 1 today. You want to get in touch? Text, email, call and WhatsApp.
We're cooking with sunshine, cholera. We're washing with sunshine, cholera. We're heating with sunshine, cholera. The future looks good.
With solar panels, battery storage and domestic wind turbines from Era Electrical, you can slash your electricity bills and recoup your investment in as little as 7 years. Call now to find out more.
676-544. Future looks good.
Whether starting a new business or building up your existing business, come and talk to the accounts and tax experts at Nicola Bowker & Co. With their holistic approach to business advice, Nicola Bowker & Co. will work with you to achieve success. For accounts that work, call 861 271.
Back pain, neck pain, headaches, joint pain. At Align for Life Spine and Posture Clinic, we've been helping Manx residents for 15 years with our holistic, evidence-based care and therapies. Plus, we're now open Saturdays to make it even easier to see us. Visit our brand new website at alignforlife.com or find us on Facebook for opening hours and more information. Align for Life, 15 years serving the community of the Isle of Man.
Mrs. White is the only admitted killer. It was her with the rope.
I admit nothing. It was Miss Peacock in the kitchen with a dagger.
The Service Players present the hilarious comedy Whodunit, Clue, at the Gaiety Theatre on the 14th to the 16th of November.
How dare you! It was Miss Scarlet with a candlestick. No, it was Professor Plum with the revolver in the study.
It was Colonel Mustard in the lounge with the wrench.
Clue, based on the devilishly enjoyable Cluedo board game.
Buy your tickets from villagaiety.com or the box office.
Wouldn't want you missing out on the fun now, would we?
With another successful spell on the road in the bag, it's time for FC Isle of Man to try and replicate their good form on their own patch in the NWCFL Premier Division this weekend. Abbey Hay are the latest to be welcomed to the Bowl this Saturday, with the Ravens aiming for a 4th straight win to continue their top 5 charge. Join me, Rob Pritchard and Darren Timpson for FC Isle of Man versus Abbey Hay, kicking off at 6 p.m. this Saturday. Manx Radio will be bringing you full live match commentary on our DAB and AM 1368 channels. Live coverage of FC Isle of Man on Manx Radio is supported by Selton, investing in our community.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
11 minutes to 1. Eddie, hello Eddie, you're live with the Treasury Minister.
Good afternoon. Perhaps your Minister could explain something to me. I was on a couple of weeks ago, and what I did is I drew a comparison with a borough in England with the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man has got approximately 85,000 people, and I think, I'm not too sure, perhaps you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, 2,500 civil servants. A similar borough in England, which has, I picked one from random, 235,000 people, and they only had 2,500 civil servants. The ratio seems to be that we've got 3 times the amount that we should have. Can you explain that? Or on top of that, you had an earlier caller who said we've just employed another 14 It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Eddie, and good afternoon to you. So again, the Isle of Man is a nation, and so we do far much more than a borough in England. I mean, we set our own taxation, we collect our own taxation, we collect our own national insurance, we run a healthcare service, we own a steam packet company, we run the airport. So there's a huge amount of work that needs to be done there to provide the services for a whole independent country. When you look at the jobs we've got in the public service, so in terms of the private sector, around about 37,000 jobs are in there. About 30% of all jobs in the Isle of Man economy are public sector jobs, but education is almost 5,000. The healthcare sector is 6,200. Public administration is about 5,000. But that includes a whole range of issues such as police, fire brigade, everything that makes this a great place to live and work in. So we do far more than a simple borough in England, and there are some costs involved in that. What we also do is obviously international relations. So we will be going over to England on a regular basis, fighting our corner in terms of the people of the Isle of Man. I understand that the Chief Minister is going over to be at the Cenotaph again this year. We represent the Isle of Man people in a way that a simple mayor of a borough of England would never have the opportunity of doing. So the way of running a whole nation is very much more complicated than running a small borough.
Eddie?
Well, surely any borough over there has got a police force to run, a fire brigade to run, schools to run, hospitals to run, so on. I can't see that we need twice as many civil servants to do what tiny little bit extra that we have. I just don't wear that one at all.
And just existentially, Treasury Minister, yeah. I mean, the Chief Minister did say that he wanted to shrink government.
Yep. And again, from Eddie's point of view, I mean, a local borough would not run their own healthcare system. They wouldn't run their own ambulance service. They wouldn't run the police service. You do have some police commissioners that run in various regions of the UK. But actually what we do, what the central government does here, tries to mimic what happens in Whitehall, what happens right across local and central government in the UK. You're quite right, Andy, that the Chief Minister has absolutely said that trying to reduce the amount of money and the amount of people, the headcount in government is very, very important. And we've been leading on this for the last couple of years in terms of trying to control the headcount, control the vacancies. I mean, Eddie's pointed out, I think it was a Freedom of Information request that showed that extra managers have been brought in to Manx Care. A lot of them have been actually tasked with the job of trying to control the spending of the healthcare service, which we've already discussed is quite complicated. Okay. So if you want to provide those services, if you want people there to help the vulnerable in our society, you have to employ those doctors, those police officers, and those teachers.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got to dash on because we're stacked up with questions here. This one is from Chris, who just said, is the Treasury Minister going to increase national insurance contributions in place of a tax increase? Is the tax increase going to be removed in February's budget? And if NI is going up, will that be employer-sided or employee-sided? And how does he see that stimulating the local economy, which the Department for Enterprise is working to address issues that it's facing?
Yeah, I mean, Chris makes a very good point. Thanks for your questions. In terms of the tax increase from 20% to 22%, I'd said in February that my ambition was to bring in a healthcare levy to replace that next year. That has become far more complicated than I thought, and I probably won't be able to remove that 2% increase, but we will be looking at the healthcare levy to replace it as soon as possible. In terms of national insurance, we are looking at that at the moment. We don't have to follow with the UK. To put it in proportion, because I got one of my colleagues to do some calculations. In the UK, if you're on a salary of £38,000, that change that they did would add the NI bill to the person employing that person by about £1,100 a year. So it is a significant increase in the taxation on particularly small businesses. And I think that is very difficult when those small businesses, particularly on the Isle of Man, are dealing with other challenges, other threats. And one of the other issues that came up yesterday and has come up on the Isle of Man is the whole issue of the minimum wage and linking that with the living wage as well, and how we manage to deal with that while still boosting our economy and growing our economy for the benefit of the people who live here.
Okay, briefly, if you would, do you see prescription charges going up?
One of the things that Laurie Hooper, when he was in the Department of Health and Social Care, was very keen on doing, rather than just increasing the charges, was looking at the exemptions. So about 80% of people don't pay anything. So charges just affect the 20% of people who pay for prescriptions, often working people, often earning not a huge amount of money, who then, if they get sick, have to fork out. It's £3.50. It's a very small amount of money compared with across, and it does nothing to meet the significant bill for medications on the Isle of Man, which is over £20 million. And it never will do. It's just a way of trying to contribute to it. So I think we certainly need to have that debate about both the eligibility criteria for free prescriptions and who should get it and who needs to get it, but also look at the cost of prescriptions and making people more responsible for the use, because we know that there's a huge waste in terms of medications that some people get from the chemist but actually never use.
Okay, when will you be going back to Tynwald to debate the National Insurance Fund?
We've got a debate in November this year, based on the paper that we've produced, to look at some of these decisions that can be taken, to look at ways we can sustain the fund. This isn't a raid on the NI fund. This is actually saying we've got £1 billion there that's been trusted to the government to look after, to invest sensibly, and to spend to support pensions, how we can sustain it in the long term.
Okay, but what do you say to people who do characterise it as a raid on the fund?
I have got no intention to take money from the NI fund and spend it on revenue spending or on any other projects there.
Okay, thanks for being with us today, Treasury Minister. Good to hear from you.
Thank you.
You can hear this programme as a podcast. Take it wherever you want, 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world. In fact, if you're listening to this programme as a podcast, well, thank you. You've been in the company of the Treasury Minister, Dr. Alex Allinson, MHK. We're back with an open line tomorrow between 12 and 1. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your hot tune, and I'll see you on the 1st of November. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones.
WINT EVF, fueling the island and fueling you, with a great range of fresh foods and everyday essentials at our filling stations, and always great offers too. Ellen Mannin Fuels.
70 million workdays lost. A cost of up to £99 billion to the UK economy. Can your business afford to ignore mental health? St John Ambulance have partnered with Mental Health First Aid England in a bid to transform workplace mental health and support staff. We are offering adult mental health first aid training courses to encourage early intervention, helping you recognise the signs and symptoms and guide a person to the right support. Call St John Ambulance on 674 387 today.